and we decided that it worked really well, the two of us together, and so we felt that we should do another presentation together again. So here we are. But as a reminder, it might be useful just for us to sort of talk about who we are and what we do at Anicca. So I'm Amy. I'm a PR strategist. I've been with the business now for around, I think it's 3 years. Time flies. And my background's fully in PR and comms. Sort of started off in very traditional PR, stuffing press releases into envelopes. And now it's all about link building. So like we couldn't be further from where I kind of began, but I am quite old as well. So
no, Amy, not at all. And I'm Ebony. I have been with Anicca for a year now, just over a year actually. And I support Amy in PR. We work in the PR content and SEO team, so we call ourselves Owned and Earned. I've been with Anicca for a year. My background is kind of more, I started out, 10 years of experience. I started out in like generalist marketing roles, and then in the last kind of 3 to 4, 5 years, I have specialised more in content, PR, SEO. So excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I am. Brilliant. So shall we crack on then? What we're going to do, we've got a couple of polls as well to do during the presentation as well. But we're just going to start off just by reminding or telling you about Anicca, because some of you may be familiar, some might not be. So we're a full marketing agency based in the, I wish it was just PR, all about PR, based in the East Midlands, but we work with clients on a national basis. We are an award-winning agency as well. We are fully transparent.
Sorry, I'd like to get that one in there.
Yeah, I know. So full discipline through from kind of paid media, pay-per-click, through to paid social, organic social, PR, and also creative. So we've got a kind of full service offer, really, in terms of what we do. And obviously, we look after PR and content. We work within the SEO offer, because SEO is so aligned to PR and content. We have a very much an integrated approach, and that's because we've got people, experts across all different disciplines. It means that we can work with our clients not just on one kind of project, we can work across many and as a kind of partner to that client. So it's a really effective way of working. Okay, so getting a story. So what we're going to do within this presentation, we felt that before we've talked about kind of the doing, how we do PR, but there is so much that goes on behind the scenes, things that people never see. And actually, there's a lot of hard work to get to the piece of coverage that you see or the link that you might generate from a PR story. So we wanted to actually sort of go through how we, all the kind of background work that goes on that you might not see. Am I doing a poll at this point, Ebony? I can't remember.
Yeah, let me launch it quickly. Good job you remembered. So there's a poll. I should have just launched it, so hopefully that's come up on your screen. But we essentially, I think I've just launched it's open.
Yes,
I thought I just clicked the wrong one. Yes. Essentially, we want to know how much time you spend planning your PR activity. So is it not much? Is it, kind of 40% or below, or around that kind of time? Or are you spending over 50% of your time planning your activity? I will let the answers come in.
Yes.
As expected, actually. This is interesting, but most people have put in not much. 85% of people have put not much so far.
It's the majority now, 86, yeah. Incredible. Because, that's really understandable, because I think when you're asked to deliver an activity, all of us want to kind of run before we can walk, and we just want to get that press release out there and get news coverage. Or whatever the objective is of the piece of work that you're doing, but actually you can be so much more effective if you spend time planning it, and we'll go into the reasons why. So first of all, I'm going to look at how you get a story. Okay, so one of the most important things that we can do is plan and think about the story and think about what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes it might be hard to come up with that idea around actually how are we going to do that, or what techniques, we know what we want to say, but what techniques or tactics are we going to use to get it into the hands of the journalist at the right time. So what we would do always is an ideation. I suppose you might have called it a brainstorm years ago, but an ideation is something that allows you to pull loads of different ideas together. Sort of no answer is a wrong answer, but it allows you to kind of scope out and build and pad out your information. We really need to sort of make sure we're developing the context and narrative around what we're going to be doing for outreach. And one of the key things we need to do here is think about the business objectives. So whether you work in-house and thinking about the objectives that are set as a wider business, or your clients' business objectives, it's really important to start with them, because you want to make sure that you are going to be on message, on brand, and kind of on point. So that's something you need to really bear in mind the whole time. So it might be that you have a kind of an idea about how you're going to communicate a piece of news, but actually it might be really off your company's or your clients' brand persona or brand positioning. So that's really important to have in your mind when you do this. So it's important to understand objectives. And as it says here, we don't let that hamper creativity. However, you've got to have some kind of baseline in terms of where you can start from. So let's think about, there's two kind of elements here. One's context and the second's ideation. So let's think, you would think about the products and services that you're promoting or wanting to push, the target audience, and what they are looking to achieve, what messaging they want to have, and what they're looking to get from the news. What kind of content and what you're looking to achieve through the outreach, whether it's link building or gaining a market share on a competition, sort of a share voice. And finally, what publications you want to get into. It could be that you actually want to get into 5 top tier publications, or you've got sort of more mass market story that you kind of want to get sort of more scattergun approach, broad coverage. So it's important at this point to think about what you're looking to achieve. So for example, if it's a corporate announcement, you would want to be targeting business journalists, business press in your area. It wouldn't be something that's applicable for consumer magazines, particularly, or kind of potentially an influencer. So really important to kind of think about where you're going to be targeting that information. Then moving on to ideation, how would we do this? Now, we could probably spend a whole webinar around ideation, the different techniques. So just trying to kind of pull them down into kind of little small bite-sized pieces here. So we could do a group session whereby you have lots of different people, and that could be not just people that you work with, say, in your marketing team. It could be actually people from across the business who might have an influence on what's happening with that particular campaign. So don't discount people from HR or the admin team or sales or warehouse, for example. It's important actually to get ideas from across the board, because everyone's going to have a different touch point with that particular information or activity that you're looking to promote. It doesn't always work, but it's always worth thinking about, actually, could we get a broader amount of people to kind of input into this? It's important that you're kind of really up to speed in terms of current news and trends. You don't want to be putting information out there that's not on trend anymore, or actually is as a bad news story. So be aware of the political landscape, be aware of what's happening in kind of the wider news, because actually some stories, when you push them out, it might be they have to hold them back because of what's happening in the wider world as well. So it's always really good to keep abreast of what's happening in terms of the news agenda. Then thirdly, desktop research, and we're going to look at some of the ways in which you can do that. But you can do a lot of kind of by looking online and getting some ideas online, and we'll go through that shortly. And content themes, that's around kind of thinking about what pieces of content would we want to look at and what kind of elements of that are going to be relevant for this particular campaign. In terms of target publications, one of the things that's great to do at the start of a PR campaign before you're writing the press release is thinking about what are those publications that you want to target. We've mentioned it earlier. I work to a kind of gold, silver and bronze list. So gold would be those publications that your client or your business always wants to be seen in. So, for example, if you're a publishing business, you'll have a list of publishing targets that you would want to appear in. However, there might be a business angle to what you're saying. So you might have, as a kind of silver tier, business publications, and they're relevant to your industry. And the writers were also relevant to what you want to be targeting as well. That's really important. So when you're targeting a publication, you need to understand who you're targeting, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Domain authority. With PR, we're looking to achieve links, looking to achieve backlinks, and increase a domain rating of a website, and making sure that you're seen. So gaining share of voice and making sure that you're seen in Google's rankings. So to do that, we want to make sure we're targeting those publications that have got really high domain authority or domain ranking. If they're very low and they're probably in your bronze target list, it's possibly worth discounting them. Look at those publications that have actually got high domain rating and are relevant to you. In some industries, there are target publications, however, that have a low domain rating, but they're absolutely spot on for the message that that client or that business wants to put out. So there are some kind of conduits to this, but in general, we would be looking at those publications that have got higher domain authority. Researching popular content themes is important. You need to make sure you're on trend and kind of very much in line with the popular opinion or the opinion of your business and the kind of themes that are happening. So, for example, let's think about AI. If you've got a story that's you can put together news around AI, that's important because it's such a massive topic at the moment, and every sort of headlines about AI. So it would be wise to do something in that area. Another thing you can do is to identify coverage gaps. So there might be stories that you think this press should be talking about, but they're not. And you know that your competitors are not talking about them. So you can gain share voice from them by actually looking at the gaps in coverage. So you can identify what those are and plug them, basically. So I'm going to ask Ebony to jump onto this slide because she's more familiar with this, but it's a tool that you can use to collate your ideas.
Yeah, so it's a tool that I personally use, but it's just one idea and one way of putting all of the ideas that you might have into like a consolidated format, so you can refer back to stuff and you can you can kind of start to collate all of your thoughts down on paper, or in this case, obviously on a digital board. So craft.do, there's a link for it, so make sure you download the handout so you can refer back to some of these links. But essentially, it's just like an application that you can use there. You can set up like a folder. So for how I use it is I'll set up a folder for each client that we've got. And then within that folder, I will then start to add different things into the board. So you can add links from stories that you've seen that are of interest. So for this particular one, hopefully you can kind of see the screenshot a little bit. But this was for a construction client who offered training to the construction industry. The types of things that they could chime in on were, around conversations around skills gaps within the industry, unemployment rates in the local areas that they operate. So in here, I've just started to dump a load of different things that I have found interesting and can relate to that client, and they could, add conversation into. And then just what I also then do is basically just have an A4 sheet, a Word document with just a load of headline ideas to begin with. And it's at this point, at these kind of early stages when you're in ideation, I would say no idea is a bad idea. Actually, when we get later on in the process, we start to validate what ideas are going to be better than others. So don't let, we put in the last slide, don't let you know, your objectives and what you know about the business kind of hamper your creativity, because I think sometimes that can be the case, can't it, Amy?
Absolutely.
Especially if you've worked somewhere for a long time, or you know, or it's your own business and it's your baby. Like, actually, yeah, don't feel like any idea is a bad idea at this point. So yeah, be as kind of creative as possible, I guess. But this is just one tool that you can use. You can do it in a host of different ways. I know, Amy, you do it in a slightly different way, don't you?
I do, and I was just going to add to what you said there, that I don't think it's right if you don't use an idea, keep it to one side. You can refer back to it for another time, because this time's really well spent and it's hard earned. You know, we saw earlier in the poll that actually people aren't spending time because there is no time, often time to do ideation and the planning, and it is really important. So if you come up with some ideas, keep them, don't throw them away, don't discard them, keep them back. So when you're looking at another campaign or planning for your year, you can dig them out and see what might be relevant and what is still something that you might want to pursue, or something, you know, might be disregarded, but it's certainly worth keeping them back and looking at them another time. Okay, so we talked about where we might find information. So when we research topics and understanding search volume trends, we can look at a number of different things. So we can utilize tools like BuzzSumo. Ahrefs is a great tool that we use all the time at Anicca, particularly when we're looking at domain authority and understanding the relevancy for publications, and finding where links are. And you can use Ahrefs to do quite intensive competitor research as well, using their URL. Another one is Answer the Public. So you can ask this tool what people's opinions are about a particular topic, and so you might put, for example, book publishing in there as a keyword, and it will come up with the questions that are being asked, the amount of questions that are being asked, and questions around that topic as well. So you might find some information that actually you hadn't thought about, and you might be able to plug some gaps that we in there as well, topics that maybe are sort of not being looked at, that the wider industry is not answering. So that could be useful to look at as well.
Just on that bottom left one as well, Amy. So that's Google Trends, which is also really great for essentially just understanding the search volumes of various keywords over a period of time. You'll see there I use a plugin as well called Glimpse, and you can download it onto your browser. But Glimpse is fantastic as well, because it also adds in an additional layer where you can look at, aside from Google, where else people are searching for those topics, and so across social media channels, for instance. So you know, you could want to kind of search a particular topic, and you can understand whether it's growing in popularity on Google or not, and then you can see, well, actually, also the second most popular platform to people are talking about this topic could be LinkedIn, or it could be TikTok, or it could be, so then that helps to just like inform some of your social activity as well. So yeah, some really useful tools there to just go and have a look at after this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so it's important that we kind of understand what the journalists you're targeting think is a news story. So it's important that what you think is newsworthy might not align with a journalist. So you don't want to be writing an advertorial or an advertising piece with a press release. That is why research is really important, because what we're trying to do is get something that you can see in a headline in a newspaper or magazine or your target press. It's not going to be a kind of piece of copy about how great your business is, sadly. It's going to be about something that your business is promoting, that's different, that's going to be great for their audience, or it's some stats or detail that no one else sort of knows about. So it becomes very interesting to their kind of wider audience. Journalists have got loads and loads of press releases being sent, so you need to be the one brand that stands out, or the service that stands out. So it's important that you do that, and you can use the ideation to make sure that idea you've got is really robust and really achieves that. And you know, I think one of the things that we always find that, you know, you've got to manage expectations of your client, or whether, you know, it's an internal stakeholder, because what is obviously really exciting and relevant to one person isn't necessarily going to be news story for a journalist. So there is internal PR and communication that needs to be done to actually manage that story and the expectations internally as well, or with the client. So over to Ebony for this particular section.
Thank you, Amy. I've just changed my screen, unfortunately, and now I haven't got my toggles to...
Oh, I can do it for you then.
I'm so sorry about that. Of course, I pressed a silly button. So yeah, we're going to talk about, now you've kind of got your ideas, you know, you've brain dumped them all down on paper. We're going to talk a little bit more about developing the story, and we wanted to start with maybe the types of stories that you might look at. Now, we've broken this down into B2C and B2B examples, but I actually just want to start by saying some of these do really cross over. So, for instance, behind the scenes, if you're doing content where you're kind of looking at, you know, how things work behind the scenes, what people might not know about your organization, that and then the people within your organization as well, that's the type of story that will work really well for B2B as well as B2C. I think the landscape of being in like a B2B business has changed quite a lot, probably over the last 10 years. I don't know if you agree, Amy. I think people very much like to see people and buy from people, and it's not such a corporate relationship anymore, even in the B2B world.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. Obviously, make sure you kind of download the handouts and use them just to kind of prompt maybe some of your own ideation after this session. But I was just going to pull some bits out and give you some hints and tips, really. So, for instance, trend-led articles. Now, I think the whole trend piece and keeping your finger on the pulse and being up to date with all the latest things is actually quite an overwhelming thing to think about, because things move so fast in the news landscape nowadays. And actually, one kind of tip from us would be, and this is something that we, a couple of weeks ago, actually, we were at a presentation and someone recommended it to us, and I thought this is a fantastic idea. So TikTok is a fantastic way to jump on trends. And at the moment, I personally operate a personal TikTok account, but actually, you know, I work for, you know, 4 or 5 different clients that I could set up separate TikTok accounts on, and then start to absorb information relating to their industry. And this works across industry. This isn't just, you know, the fashion or makeup or anything like that. Like, it really does work. There's a lot of content out there on TikTok. And what I would recommend is setting up a channel for your brand, or the brands that you are working on, starting to search content that relates to that brand and the industry, and then your For You page, the algorithm will align all of the content on your For You page to what you've been searching for, and that's a really easy way to then keep up with those trends. This isn't just I think you can do that on any social media channel. It doesn't just have to be TikTok. I just use TikTok as an example because I think actually emerging trends, TikTok seems to be the first place that emerging trends nowadays.
I think TikTok is the big one. I think Pinterest can be useful as well if you're working in particularly home, garden, those kind of areas, because people are playing their boards and their pins. So that's another area that you can actually look at for research. But it does depend on the industry. That is quite really specific for arts, craft, designing, and as home and interiors. So yeah, but otherwise TikTok is useful, even if it's not a channel you're going to be on for your product or service. Just use it to get ideas. It's where the trends are.
Totally. Like I said, I'm not going to go into these in loads of detail, but sorry, Amy, if we just go back a step for a second. Celebrity and influencer partnerships. Now, I think this is one that's worth highlighting because I think we're inundated with celebrity and influencer partnerships nowadays, and actually a lot of them can fall flat on their face because the alignment between brand and influencer can sometimes be off.
Mm.
So yeah, it's really, really important to consider the influencers that you're working with and really do your background checks on these influencers, like understand what content they've produced in the past, what are their engagement rates, like really do your due diligence when it comes to working with celebrities and influencers. I wanted to talk about, actually, this doesn't always have to be with influencers and celebrities as well. Leverage other brands that you can work with. So a great example of this last year was Barbie and Airbnb. Two brands that work together to collaborate and to essentially like increase awareness of both of their campaigns. So what they did was on Airbnb, they listed the Barbie dream house. I don't know if anyone remembers this from last year, but they gave people the opportunity, Airbnb gave people the opportunity to stay in the real Barbie dream house during the obviously the Barbie fever that was 2023. And actually what that resulted in for Airbnb, so it was promoting Airbnb's so only on Airbnb, so the places that you can only stay at through booking through Airbnb, it was promoting that area of their business. And with that particular campaign, they achieved 13,000 press, like media placements, and they achieved 250 million impressions across social media. And that listing, even to today, is by far the most popular listing that Airbnb has ever had. And just to put that into perspective, so apparently for all of the press activity that they did for that area of the business at Airbnb only, that one campaign achieved more press coverage for them than any of the campaigns, like all of the campaigns they've put together. So you can see how successful, if you get those brand partnerships right, you know, one campaign can like just tip the needle for you. So yeah, I thought that was just an interesting example to bring up.
Really good. Do you want me to jump on to the next one now?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. A couple of other examples, so things that we've worked on to kind of bring those stories to life. So in the B2B sector, you probably saw there that we like to talk, you know, we recommend stories that kind of allow expert insights or, you know, or talk about kind of themes and topics within your industry that you can add an authority on. For our client Palex, we recently did something around International Women's Day, and they operate within the logistics sector. In the logistics sector, you know, representation of women in the workforce is pretty low. That's a kind of challenge within that sector. And actually, it was an opportunity for us to position what Palex are doing, but also to challenge the industry at large to kind of do better. So we position them as a thought leader. We position them as an authority in the industry and on the topic. And then within the press release itself, you know, we spoke about what Palex is doing to, you know, make this industry more accessible, specifically for women. And we also spoke about, you know, their current representation within their workforce and actually kind of targets to improve that as well. So we were able to, we got some really good coverage on this in business and in industry press, which was the objective. And of course, within that press release, we added backlinks to their careers pages, and that was obviously a huge kind of backlink SEO benefit. Another example, slightly different example, but we've worked with Trifiber before, who are a luggage company, and this was very much a data-led campaign where we did a lot of analysis to understand what airlines were ruining people's baggage during the process of obviously a flight. So quite a hard-hitting campaign. Obviously, it's going to evoke some emotions across among different communities. The objective was to get global and national coverage, and that was achieved. And again, throughout that article, we were able to backlink to kind of key products and categories that Trifiber wanted to promote. So you can see the story is not actually, it's not obvious that that's a Trifiber story, But within the content, we were able to weave in products and services that they offer, to kind of recommending them the best hard wearing luggage, basically. So yeah, it's a really nice link there. Just going back to Amy's point earlier, journalists aren't looking to write about your brand. They're not. They're trying to write about interesting, kind of topics, and this is a great example of how you can lead with a different topic but then weave your brand into it.
It was very much a human interest story. It has some stats in there, wider research. It was something that everyone has experienced or knows someone has had a disaster with their luggage. But and the information was positioned through Tri-Fibre, so that was the authority, and they obviously are connected to that industry. So it was just the whole links worked really well, as a sort of entity news story. So, and pitched the right journalists and the right publications as well. It wasn't just like, again, scattergun approach when it was pitched out. It was specific journalists with the titles that were pre-identified as well. So that's where that research came in.
And we'll talk about pitching in a minute, but let's just finish off this section ever so quickly. So relevance for news criteria, obviously. So this is where we were talking earlier about validating your ideas. So you could come up with a load of different ideas, but then actually do they, when we get to this point and we're thinking about, well, what's relevant for news, that's then when we can begin to kind of validate them. So, are they timely and relevant? What impact is it going to kind of show for our the individuals, communities and society that we are trying to target? Is it a prominent news story? Do we have other well-known figures involved within the story, or other organizations or events? So for instance, Barbie Airbnb example kind of aligns with that. It was a too prominent, I think you can class Barbie as an influencer, can't you?
Yes.
Figures that were able to offer something of real interest, and obviously it was timely because of the time of the Barbie movie. You want to think about your geographical location. So we work with global clients, and we're not doing a scattergun approach for every story. We have specific media lists related to the regions that they operate in, and what might be relevant in the UK isn't also always relevant in the US, as an example. So we're always thinking about location of story and what's relevant for what audience. Always make sure your story is credible, and I think this is more important than ever. Like, there's a lot of stories that go out in the news nowadays that have no credibility really, and that is just absolutely key. Like, make sure that you are creating stories that are verified with facts and reliable sources.
Absolutely.
A little bit on keyword research and coverage gaps. So we have touched on kind of keywords and using, so this is where we align very much with the paid and the SEO team to make sure that whatever they are bidding for in terms of keywords, or whatever content we're producing for a client's website, we're very much aligned with that in PR as well. So first thing, just to kind of a quick step guide on how to start your keyword research. So identify the relevant keywords and phrases related to your industry or brand or target audience. So what is your audience going to be searching for in relation to your products and services? Then we use tools like Keyword Planner, SEMrush, Moz, Ahrefs to start to analyze those keyword popularity, search volume and competition. And this is where we can really start to understand where we can have an impact as a brand. So, within some industries, there might be a keyword like, let's say, sport, golf club. For instance, there's multiple different brands who are going to be competing for that specific keyword. It's a short tail keyword. It's going to be really competitive. There's going to be paid activity on it. There's going to be organic content being produced around it. And there's going to be probably 20 plus brands trying to compete for that in Google. Using a keyword planner, we can, you might you might look at longer tail keywords. So what are the best golf clubs to use, or or other examples like that, and they might be less competitive to search for but still have a positive impact in terms of like the traffic you can gain from featuring. Bringing that back to PR, once we know what those like high value keywords are, we then align that with our PR objectives and messaging. So we're not kind of going out with our PR activity and talking about something completely different to what, say, we're trying to rank for in Google, or we're the kind of ads that we're running on Google as well, or other places, not just Google. Coverage gaps. So we've spoken a little bit about coverage gaps, but you need to research your target publications to understand what they're currently talking about, and then this is where you need to identify areas where you could add value on stuff that they might not already be talking about. So for instance, things like sustainability, underreported issues in industry. Is there anything from your content that you can create content on that will add value that a journalist might not already be thinking about?
Sorry, I was just answering a question.
Okay. And then finally, we just formulate that into a plan. So this is just an example of a planner that you might use. You can use Google Sheets. You can use something like Monday.com. But yeah, the main thing is make sure it's achievable for you. So if you can only achieve outreach in one quality press release per month, or even one every 3 months, that's so much better than trying to pump out high quantity of press releases that none of them are going to land. So that's just a little bit on formalizing the plan.
Okay, so just moving on to issuing a story here. I'm conscious of time. We're already halfway through, Ebony. It's amazing.
That we might run over by about 10 minutes if everyone's okay.
I'll gallop. Okay. So it's important. We talked earlier about identifying journalists that are relevant and actually write about the topic that you're issuing. So, for example, you wouldn't issue a business story to a consumer journalist. You've got to make sure your journalist is on topic and is interested in the topic that you are speaking about. So how would you find them? So actually, X or Twitter is a great place to look for journalists. They use Twitter, X extensively. So social media is a good place. And there's different directories and databases. We use one called Cision, but there's a whole raft of them out there that you can use. And also look at the websites for each publication. They may have the journalists' names detailed. That's not always the case, and often freelancers are used. So, but it's about collating and keeping up to date with those contacts through kind of making sure you've got a kind of good relationship with them. What's important to do as well is make sure you're kind of on point in terms of what they're writing about. So look at what they've written about in the past. And if they're posting links on X, engage with that from your brand's account, so they see that you're visible and interested in what they're talking about. They are very busy people, so make sure you're targeting them in the right way at the right time. Often first thing in the morning is best because they're planning out their day, planning out their stories. And the worst time to contact a journalist is like 5 o'clock on a Friday or a bank holiday, because you ain't going to get seen. So better off to hold a story or contact until the following week. There's a number of different tools you can use to kind of to help facilitate this. Again, so X we talked about. Help a reporter out is one that's listed here. Cision, our database, but also Google Alerts. That's a great free way of actually finding out what press are writing about. So you pop your topic in, you set up how often you want to receive an alert, and then when you get an alert, you can see what the topic is, who's writing about it, and what the angle is, and start collating information and research that way. So we've talked about, as part of the kind of background work on PR, is about getting to know journalists. But how do we go about this? And again, we could spend a whole webinar talking about it. So it's very much a snapshot here. But networking and events, chamber events in your local area are a good place to start. There might be journalists there, they might have contacts they can share with you, but industry conferences or kind of trying to get one-to-one meetings with them are great, and any kind of wider networking opportunities within your business field would be useful as well. So if you go to a conference, you might want to ask the organisers if there's press attending and if they'd share the press list with you, and then you can maybe get in touch with those journalists ahead of the time and get to have a session set aside with them during the conference, for example. We have found, and when we talk about doing follow-ups of journalists, you know, in the olden days, you would pick up the phone and have an extensive list of people that you would call, sort of from 9 to 5 in the day. Now journalists mainly want to be emailed because there's fewer journalists available. They've got a lot more pressures, are working on more publications, and they just haven't got the time to sit on the phone or even meet up necessarily. So they'll often only want to be contacted by email, and they'll get back to you if they're interested. You know, there's no point sending them 5 emails saying, "Oh, did you see my email? Wondered what you thought about my email." They'll get back to you. It might be worth another prompt, but you know, don't kind of, you've got to be sort of respectful of that time with them.
I think that's like a pre-COVID versus post-COVID thing, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
Post-COVID, it's, you know, a lot more working from home. People don't have office numbers to call, but equally they might not have a work phone either, so they're not going to give up their personal mobile.
That's right.
It's massively changed because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking to a client this week or last week about trying to get through to a regional newspaper, and I'd phoned the switchboard, but there was actually no one in the office at all. The switchboard phone went to answer phone, so there wasn't even a administrator on to direct my call. So there's just the whole setup in terms of regional press. And local press, for example, has really changed, and nationals as well. Most of the journalists are working from home, so it is very different. So you have to really understand how they're communicating. So they might be active on X, so therefore just reach out to someone X as well. So it's worth seeing and investigating and researching that. Because of time, I don't know if I might just skip through this because we have actually talked about that in the previous slide, but what we're trying to say here is make sure that when you write a press release, it's straightforward, it grabs people's attention, it gets your facts out there, and it's not a sales piece. And the most important information that we would include is the who, what, where, when, how. And if you can answer all those points in the first paragraph of your press release, you've kind of won, because that's information that's often just taken from a journalist. They may not take the rest of it. That's kind of from information. So get your salient points right at the top of the press release, using sort of the body to kind of pad it out, and then any other information kind of goes right at the end or in notes to editors. When you've got your content, you've researched it, you know who you're targeting, you know the angle, you know how you're going to contact them, you've prepared your content. It takes a lot of time and effectively money to get to this stage. Make that piece of content work really hard for you. We find that we can issue a press release, but then perhaps that content can be used on social media. It can be used on a post on LinkedIn, for example, as a kind of more thought leadership piece, or an article. It might be used on a blog. So think about where else you can place that content to make it kind of land and work really hard for you. I think it's really important as well for clients or your team in-house that they can see the value of that piece of content. So it might be a standalone quote used with an image to illustrate some things. So it's just think about, actually, you've got this one piece of content, what can we do with it to make it work really hard? And in terms of when you're actually selling in a story to a journalist, make sure that you're not just sort of sending out generic email to each journalist, and make sure it's relevant to them. So make it very personal, tailor it, and kind of, you could start by saying, I've seen that, really interested in the article you wrote last week on blah. I thought you might find this news we've got released now really interesting because of something else you might be thinking, they might have written about. So then that means that journalist thinks, oh, actually, they've taken interest in me. They understand what we're doing, that is relevant. So that's really important. If we can pick up the phone, brilliant. We know it's often hard to do so, but if you can speak to journalists or see them face to face, that's fantastic. Make sure your hook is great. Make sure it's really newsworthy. It's on trend, or it has a really standout statistic, like the tri-fibre example that Ebony ran through. It's really important. And make sure it's relevant and really in sort of aligns with what the journalist is writing about.
Fab. Our last section for the day then. I've got my toggles back, Amy, which is good.
Oh, have you? I'm just going to run the poll quickly because this is yeah. Is it coming up?
It has come up. So we're just asking you, do you measure your PR activity? Yes, no, sometimes. I'll crack on to this and we'll come back to the results.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Thank you.
So I think PR measurement's a really interesting conversation to have. I don't know if you agree, Amy. I think it's like a bit of a contentious subject sometimes, in terms of like because it's so the first point on this slide, measurability, in comparison to other marketing tactics. So like if we're looking at, say, like paid media or other areas of marketing or other areas of advertising, the metrics that they would track, like clicks, conversions and impressions, are usually easy to track and there's no kind of ambiguity around it. Whereas PR, typically the outcomes that we're looking to improve with PR are brand awareness, your reputation, your influence, and they're much more qualitative in their approach, and I guess sometimes they can be harder, not impossible, absolutely not impossible, and we'll go on to the next slide of types of metrics, but yeah, I guess that's where within the world of PR, these types of like metrics and KPIs, that's where it can be like up for debate, I guess. But we always want to make sure that we align with business goals. And again, this is where, brand awareness, reputation, generating positive media coverage, that can all align with business goals. Like, for instance, if if your business goal is to increase sales by X, but then something happens within your business that highly damages your brand reputation, you can align, or you put a PR piece out there that has a positive impact on your reputation, you can attribute some of the the sales increase from your PR activity back to your kind of overall business objectives. So I've spoken about kind of subjectivity and interpretation, but ultimately we just want to make sure that everything that we do from a PR perspective is valuable and relevant to our audience, to our story, and to our brand as well. So types of metrics. So we've split this out into kind of the more traditional metrics versus digital metrics. So traditionally you would have, you'd do things like media impressions. So like readership, overall readership of the publications that you've been placed in. Media mentions. So how many times have you been mentioned within the press across a range of publications? Share of voice. What is your, how much are you being mentioned in comparison to your competitors? Obviously, you'd like to be the one that's talked about the most. And then message tone as well. So has it got a positive message? Is it neutral or is it negative? And again, that's the type of thing that we want to kind of make sure that we're monitoring, because if we're tipping onto the edge of being very negative in our coverage, we need to understand why, and what we can do to counteract that. As PR's kind of moved on, and there'll be some, a lot of agencies that maybe, will look at digital metrics as well. So we certainly do for our clients, don't we, Amy?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at things like website traffic, what's the backlink profile of our client or the brands, what's our domain rating, but also what are the domain ratings of the publications that we're being placed with, because obviously if we get a link from someone with a domain rating of 80+, that's going to have an amazing impact on our own backlink profile. social media mentions, online reputation score, and then also conversion rate as well. So we are weaving in some of the more digital metrics into our reporting.
And I think, sorry, it's important to show clients or your team in-house that you can do that as well. It might not be that they know that you can do that and it's relevant. They might just think it's an SEO measurement, but actually it's not. This is a PR measurement now, because of the relevancy of those publications you're targeting. So as much as it's important that your message and it's a quality publication, you need to get those backlinks. So that's key in this sort of digital world.
We wanted to just give some examples of the types of reports that we produce. So we tend to do like a quarterly dashboard where we're looking at a longer period of time. We're looking at, like total mentions over time, the split of domain authorities, where are most of our links coming from. You'd always expect there to be some sort of like even split, because not everywhere you're going to place is always going to be 80 plus. But equally, that's not to say you should discount websites with a lower authority as well, because if you've got an authority of 30 but you're getting links from publications that are 40, 50, that's still going to have a really positive impact for you. So yeah, don't always put pressure on yourself to think, oh God, I've got to get links from like high authority publications because that's the only way I'm going to change the dial. Actually, no, like it's a work in progress and you can progress in baby steps, I guess.
But there has to be relevancy as well, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
publications are so unique, and some of the clients we work with have got they're very unique clients. They've got very unique targets. So actually, their kind of hit list would be perhaps a lower rating publication, but it's important they get coverage in there. So yeah.
And we also do monthly coverage reports as well. So this drills into a lot more detail about what story, what campaigns have we run this month and what coverage have we got off of the back of those. And yeah, we can kind of drill down into the detail a little bit more with those monthly coverage reports. So just to end, I've got a couple of different examples from campaigns that we've run as an agency. So the first one is for Charles Bentley, who are in the home and garden sector. For this, we delivered an integrated marketing campaign to drive revenue and brand awareness, and support search as well through earning links and amplifying domain authority. So kind of some of the things that we've spoken about. This was a B2C campaign, and the kind of key objective was to promote key product ranges to press within that sector. And aside from that, there was a kind of a sub campaign which was about conducting a corporate PR strategy to showcase the business's like rapid expansion, which was to trade and sector press as well. So you can see we reached, as part of that campaign, over 1 million people were reached. Paid traffic was up 120% and referral traffic was up 57%. So with referral traffic, that's saying that people are essentially landing on someone else's website, clicking on a link to our website, and they're being referred to us. So that's naturally PR activity that is kind of generating that traffic. So yeah, you can see some really positive results there. And then last but not least, Palex as well. So we've spoken about Palex before, but essentially our objective for them is to position them as a thought leader. We did this through a kind of a robust PR campaign. And essentially what we've achieved for them is 97 pieces of coverage, reaching nearly 1 million people. And they actually had 3 times year-on-year growth in their sales. So yeah, just a couple of examples there. Obviously, we are getting close to 10 o'clock. So
noticing the time.
Through them after the session, but if you're happy, Amy, and I don't know, it would be nice to stay on for an extra 10 minutes and answer some questions.
I can't, so I've got another call sadly, but sorry, 'cause it got moved from yesterday. But we've just a couple of questions regarding